Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're navigating a topic that is, well, not just critical, but really profoundly complex. It's impacting communities everywhere. Fentanyl, it's a word you hear all the time in the headlines, but the real story behind its spread,
Yeah.
it's much more intricate and, frankly, surprising than most people realize.
And that's exactly our mission today. We really want to move beyond just the shock value, the surface headlines.
Right.
In this deep dive, we'll meticulously peel back the layers. We'll start with the actual chemistry, what makes fentanyl so potent. Then we'll trace its complex global supply chain. We have to talk about the documented roles of key players like China and Mexico, which can be, well, sometimes conflicting.
Okay.
And finally, we'll connect all that to the bigger picture, the geopolitics, like U.S.-China trade stuff, and also take a hard look at domestic drug control efforts. Think of it as a journey through chemistry, global economics, and these really sophisticated criminal networks.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When most of us think about illicit drugs, maybe you picture plants, right, grown in fields, or maybe these super secret high-tech labs.
You have the typical images.
But with fentanyl, that picture doesn't really fit, does it? Is it like naturally derived at all, or is it completely man-made?
You're hitting on a really crucial distinction right away. Fentanyl is absolutely not a naturally occurring substance. Zero.
Okay.
It's entirely synthetic. It's produced through chemical reactions in a lab environment. Our sources point out several ways to make it, these synthetic pathways. There are established ones like the Janssen method and the Siegfried method. But what's really striking and honestly quite concerning is something called the Gupta method. It was published back in 2005.
Gupta method.
Yeah, and it's described basically as a streamlined recipe. Get this, just 3 steps. And, critically, no specialized lab equipment needed.
Wait, just 3 steps and no special equipment. That sounds, almost deceptively simple for something so incredibly potent.
It does, doesn't it?
Does that imply you don't actually need, some genius chemist or a fancy high-tech facility to cook this stuff up?
That's exactly what's so striking and pretty disturbing based on the sources. We found this account, right, from a Mexican fentanyl cook.
Okay.
This individual reportedly dropped out of school at age 12, and he described making fentanyl as, and this is a quote, like making chicken soup.
Chicken soup.
Chicken soup. And mega easy. He claimed he learned the whole trade as an apprentice in just 6 months. 6 months.
Oh.
Then he set up his own operation in Sinaloa State.
Wow.
This detail, it really suggests that the barrier to entry, skill-wise, might be much, much lower than you'd ever imagine for such a dangerous drug. It kind of flips the script on illicit manufacturing.
Chicken soup.
Yeah.
That's a powerful analogy.
Yeah.
Chilling, really. But if it's that easy to learn and make, what does that mean for trying to stop it? It sounds like you're playing whack-a-mole with something that can just pop up anywhere.
Exactly. That chicken soup thing isn't just some dark anecdote. It changes the game for drug interdiction. It means the old war on drugs playbook, focusing on raiding these complex high-tech labs,
Yeah.
largely obsolete for fentanyl. The real leverage, the critical choke point here, isn't finding the chemists. It's controlling the basic ingredients.
The chemicals.
The precursors. That's a fundamental shift in strategy, because if the how-to isn't the main hurdle, then controlling those raw materials, the precursors, becomes absolutely paramount if you want to control distribution. And let's not forget why this matters so much. Fentanyl's extreme potency, we're talking 50 times stronger than heroin.
50 times.
And 100 times stronger than morphine. So a tiny amount of the finished product made from these maybe easily acquired precursors can have just a devastating widespread impact.
That makes perfect sense. So, okay, if the recipe is chicken soup, simple. Focus has to shift to the ingredients. Let's pivot to those precursors. What are they exactly? What chemicals are we talking about?
Right, so precursors are basically the essential chemical compounds. Think of them like the chemical building blocks for fentanyl.
Okay, like Lego bricks.
Exactly like Lego bricks. Put them together in the right order, you get fentanyl. For fentanyl, a key set of these bricks are called piperidines. They form the core structure. Specific examples the cartels are looking for, things like N-phenylethyl 4-piperidone, usually called NPP.
NPP, got it.
And 4-anilenopiperidine, or 4-AP. Others you might hear about are benzylfentanyl and propenyl chloride. These aren't random. They're the precise ingredients needed. Now here's a major challenge. Many of these precursors, they also have perfectly legitimate industrial uses.
Oh, right. Like what?
Things like perfumes, pharmaceuticals, rubber production, dyes. everyday products. So trying to just tightly restrict all of them globally, the sources say that would basically upend global commerce.
Yeah, you can't just ban them all.
Exactly. And again, potency matters. Because fentanyl is so strong, even tiny amounts of these precursors can make a huge number of pills. So both the ingredients and the final product are exceptionally easy to hide. It's like finding that needle in a haystack, but the needle is incredibly small and incredibly deadly.
That just makes the task seem almost impossible.
Yeah.
So, given these precursors are so vital, where are they mostly coming from? Who's the main supplier of these chemical building blocks?
The sources we looked at are very, very clear on this point. Most fentanyl trafficked into the United States is manufactured using precursors imported from Chinese suppliers.
Okay, primarily China then.
Primarily China. Researchers actually identified more than 90 China-based chemical companies openly offering fentanyl precursors online.
90 companies, just openly.
Openly online. And get this, a striking 90% accepted cryptocurrency payments.
Wow, crypto. Makes sense for hiding it.
Mm-hmm. And many of these suppliers explicitly mentioned shipping these chemicals straight to Mexico. Some were even quite brazenly willing to supply fentanyl itself, even though it's been banned in China since 2019.
Unbelievable. So this isn't just a couple of shady operators. Can you give us examples? Any specific companies named?
Absolutely. The sources name names. A Marvel Biotech is one.
Yeah.
Their sales agent reportedly had this very aggressive attitude, used some pretty offensive language, basically telling the U.S. off when asked about responsibility. The quote was, "F you, Yankee."
Seriously.
That's what the source reports. Others identified include Anhui Ruhan Technology, Jiangsu Bangdea New Material Technology, also Wuhan Shukong Biological Technology, WSBT, and its owner Yao Huatao. They've actually been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury.
Okay.
And another one, Hebei Shenghao. Its operators, Chunzu Chen and Chunghui Chen, were indicted. Chunghui Chen was specifically noted for having multiple crypto wallets.
So these Chinese companies are just openly selling these dangerous chemicals online. How do these deals actually happen across borders? How are they communicating, getting paid, without getting caught easily?
Yeah, technology is a huge enabler here, making it incredibly tough to track. The sellers, they insist on using encrypted messaging apps.
Like Signal or WhatsApp?
Exactly. Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp. Negotiations often happen in English or Spanish. And payments, almost always cryptocurrency. Bitcoin's the most popular, followed by Tether. And the sources explicitly note this makes it incredibly difficult for traditional banking systems or law enforcement to follow the money trail directly. It's digital, it's fast, it's relatively anonymous.
Right.
It's been reported that something like $27 million in crypto was traced to these Chinese companies. Now, that sounds like a lot, but listen to this. That $27 million is enough precursor material to make an estimated $54 billion worth of fentanyl pills.
54 billion.
Billion with a B. Enough, potentially, to cause 8.6 billion fatal overdoses.
That's more than the world's population.
It's staggering. Now, it's really important here to present China's official side of the story, too, because it contrasts sharply.
Okay, what do they say?
The Chinese embassy spokesperson states that China is working on controls for 3 specific fentanyl precursors. They say they're cracking down on illegal activities, targeting online ads. They've shuttered 14 online platforms, closed hundreds of company accounts. Plus, their compliance rate for sending electronic data on packages coming to the U.S. by mail reportedly went up from 32% in 2017 to 85% in 2019. That's according to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service.
Okay, so they claim they're making efforts.
They do. However, the sources also point out that despite these claims, journalists from Reuters were still able to openly buy precursors. So it raises questions about how effective those controls really are on the ground. And Chinese officials also push back with a broader view. Basically, fentanyl is the U.S.'s problem, not China's. They see it as a demand issue within the U.S. that America needs to fix itself.
Right, the demand versus supply argument. Okay, so the precursors, often bought with crypto, shipped from China, they land in Mexico. What happens next? Where are these labs? Who's putting the chicken soup together?
That's the next critical stage. This is where the Mexican cartels really step into the spotlight. The sources say most U.S. destined illicit fentanyl appears to be produced clandestinely in Mexico using chemical precursors from China.
Yep.
These Mexican transnational criminal organizations, TCOs, especially the big ones, Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, they've really developed the capability to mass produce fentanyl inside Mexico just over the last 5 years or so.
Wow.
Financial reports often pinpoint Sinaloa and Jalisco states as the major hubs for this activity. They're essentially the final assembly points in this whole global chain.
And how are they processing it? You mentioned pills earlier.
Yeah, exactly. They use these pill presses, often imported from China, by the way. They press the fentanyl powder into tablets.
Right.
And this is key. These pills are often made to look exactly like legitimate prescription painkillers. You know those little blue M30 oxycodone pills?
Yeah, I've seen pictures.
They make counterfeits that look identical but are laced with fentanyl. It's incredibly dangerous because users might think they're taking oxy, but it's fentanyl. They also lace other counterfeit meds, even veterinary drugs sometimes. And some of these fake pills are reportedly sold, sometimes quite openly, in pharmacies along the U.S.-Mexico border and in tourist areas.
In pharmacies. Wow. That's terrifying.
It is. And just to show how accessible this is, those Reuters journalists, the ones who ordered precursors, they had 6 shipments delivered right to Mexico City. And they also got hold of a pill press and the molds, the dyes, to make those fake blue M30 pills. Shows you the whole production setup isn't that hard to acquire.
So the tools are available, the precursors are flowing in. What about Mexican authorities? Are they stopping this?
Well, the sources indicate that Mexican customs officials have reportedly struggled to detect the illicit diversion of these chemicals. It's a huge challenge.
I can imagine.
This struggle has led to serious concern. One U.S. senator suggested Mexico is either not taking this crisis seriously enough or is maybe even complicit with the cartels, especially since Mexican ports are often reportedly controlled by these criminal groups and act as key entry points for precursors.
That's a strong accusation. Is there any cooperation happening?
There is. The U.S. and Mexico have cooperation initiatives like the Bicentennial Framework and the North American Drug Dialogue. They're trying to work together. And Mexico has taken some recent steps. They created a bigger watch list for chemicals, expanded it from 14 to 69 items. And they passed a constitutional reform to ban fentanyl production, distribution, and consumption. So there's movement, but the scale of the problem is just immense.
It really sounds like a complex, constantly shifting web. Okay, so after it's made in Mexico, often disguised as legit pills, how does the final product actually get into the United States? Are we talking tunnels, backpacks across the desert, or something else?
This is another part of the story that kind of upends common assumptions. While you might picture, dramatic clandestine crossings. Right. The sources reveal a really surprising critical fact. The vast majority of fentanyl that's coming into the United States at the southern border is coming through the ports of entry.
Through the legal crossings, really?
That's right. Over 90% of the volume arrives via legal crossing points and also interior vehicle checkpoints. It's often hidden within legitimate commercial cargo inside tractor trailers and vans.
Wow. So hiding in plain sight, basically.
Pretty much. And here's another key finding that often surprises people. U.S. citizens are the primary smugglers.
Wait, not foreign nationals, U.S. citizens.
Primarily, yes. Data looking at fiscal years 2019 up to June 2024 showed that 81.2% of all seizures at ports of entry along the southwest border were U.S. citizens. The median age was about 30.
80%. Why U.S. citizens?
Well, the strategy seems to be leveraging the sheer volume. Think about it. On an average day, like in March 2025, you had over 204,000 personal vehicles crossing, nearly 105,000 pedestrians.
It's like a massive flow of traffic.
Yeah, massive. So the low chance of any individual person being subject to a more detailed screening is the calculation. Reports suggest Customs and Border Protection stops less than 3% of even cocaine smuggled through land ports. It highlights the challenge of finding drugs in that huge flow. And we should also mention mail smuggling. It's a significant issue, too. Federal prisons, for instance, saw a 600% rise in drug overdoses among inmates, mostly driven by fentanyl smuggled in through the Postal Service. Another vulnerability.
Okay, this is bringing us to the bigger picture now. We've talked China, Mexico smuggling. What's the impact of the whole U.S.-China trade war on this fentanyl situation? It sounds like there's a lot of political tension muddying the waters.
You're absolutely right. It gets really complex here, and the sources show different, often conflicting viewpoints. Some sources suggest that former President Trump used tariffs partly as retaliation because China wasn't doing enough, in the U.S. view, to curb fentanyl exports. The idea is that China sometimes uses cooperation on fentanyl as leverage, basically, a bargaining chip to get certain guarantees or the right price in other negotiations.
Using fentanyl cooperation as a political tool.
That's one perspective presented, but then other sources argue quite strongly that the U.S. fentanyl problem is fundamentally demand-driven.
Right, the argument we heard earlier.
Exactly. And from that view, you can't really stop it just by targeting supply from China or anywhere else without seriously addressing the reasons why there's so much demand for opioids in the U.S. in the first place. This all leads to what the sources call a clear trust deficit between the two countries. The whole issue gets heavily politicized.
Yeah, I can see that.
China, for its part, feels like the U.S. is always asking other countries for requirements. There's this quote reflecting their view. It's like being sick yourself, but asking others to take medicine.
Hmm. Pointing fingers instead of looking inward.
That's the sentiment expressed. They also point to U.S. reluctance, in their view, to curb demand effectively. They might mention things like cannabis legalization or supervised injection sites as contributing to a drug-using culture, and feel like China is being scapegoated for a problem rooted in American society.
Okay.
And these broader geopolitical tensions definitely have a direct impact. For instance, that vital U.S.-China counter-narcotics cooperation. It actually stalled completely after a U.S. House Speaker visited Taiwan back in August 2022.
Really? Just stopped.
Ground to a halt. It only started up again after the meeting between President Xi and President Biden in late 2023. It just shows how linked this crisis is to the bigger diplomatic picture.
So with all this focus on foreign suppliers, international politics, what about the U.S. itself? What does this mean for America's own drug control efforts? Are we potentially turning a blind eye to domestic challenges while pointing fingers abroad? How are things looking at home?
Well, the domestic picture is grim, frankly. The statistics really underscore the scale of the challenge here. The fentanyl crisis cost the U.S. economy nearly $1.5 trillion in 2020.
1.5 trillion.
In 1 year.
Trillion with a T. That was about 7% of the entire U.S. GDP that year. Just think about that economic impact.
That's staggering.
And the human cost is even worse. Over 110,000 American lives lost to drug overdose in 2023 alone. Fentanyl was involved in 70% of those deaths. It's now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45.
Leading cause of death for young adults. Just devastating.
Absolutely. Now, if you look at how the U.S. is spending money to fight this, the federal drug control budget for FY 2023 was over $43.7 billion.
Okay, that's a lot of money. Where does it go?
The biggest chunk, over $21.6 billion, went to treatment, which is crucial, obviously. But prevention only got about $2.7 billion.
Much less on prevention. Right. Then you had domestic law enforcement getting $11.4 billion, interdiction stopping drugs at the border $6.8 billion, and international efforts only just over $1 billion. So the budget heavily leans towards treating the existing crisis, maybe less on stopping it before it starts, or international cooperation.
Interesting breakdown.
And here's a really significant domestic challenge highlighted in the sources. Despite having what are described as robust U.S. regulations for fentanyl precursors and the equipment to make pills, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, found that 37 of 38 domestic suppliers they checked, suppliers of key precursors like benzylfentanyl and 4-AP, these are list I chemicals that require registration.
Okay.
37 out of 38 were not registered with DEA to handle list I chemicals.
Wait, domestic suppliers weren't following the rules?
That's what the DEA finding suggests. A major compliance gap right here in the U.S., even with regulations already on the books, designed to prevent exactly this kind of diversion. Now, to be clear, the U.S. does have comprehensive laws. There's the Controlled Substances Act, CSA, the HALT Fentanyl Act, the Project Precursor Act, all aimed at control, and systems like the DEA's Suspicious Orders Database and ARC-ES, which track controlled substances.
Right, so the tools exist.
The legal and tracking tools exist, but the sheer persistence of the problem, those overdose numbers, the economic costs, and findings like the one about unregistered domestic suppliers, it all points to just how incredibly difficult this fight is. Even with significant resources and laws in place, there are clearly still major challenges and maybe gaps in enforcement or strategy.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, a much clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of fentanyl's journey from its basic chemistry to the global supply lines, the huge role China plays, the complexities in Mexico, and the immense challenges faced right here in the U.S.
It truly is a multifaceted challenge, isn't it? And one that just demands continuous learning and understanding, especially when you consider how relatively easy it can be to make, the constantly shifting tactics of traffickers, and this really complex geopolitical overlay.
Indeed. It's definitely a reminder that staying informed on critical global issues like this is absolutely essential for navigating the complex world we live in. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.